They thought they could discard me like an extra digit in their spreadsheet, but days later, those same numbers detonated like a bomb in the executive boardroom. I didn't need to scream, slam desks, or spit venomous words. I only needed silence, and let the system I built speak for itself. When those blood-red words, "access denied," flashed before the faces of those who humiliated me, my silence became their sentence. They tried to erase me from their payroll, never realizing I was the heartbeat of their entire financial infrastructure. My name is Emma Wallace, and after 15 years of building their financial empire from the ground up, they severed me like a cancerous growth in less than 5 minutes. It was 9:30 a.m. on a Tuesday when the new CFO, Marcus Thornton, summoned me to his corner office. He'd been in the building exactly 72 hours. The mahogany door felt heavier than usual as I pushed it open, finding him seated behind the massive desk that still smelled of his predecessor's cologne. He didn't look up from his laptop, just gestured vaguely at the chair across from him with manicured fingers that had never touched a spreadsheet past midnight. "Emma," he said, finally gracing me with eye contact. His smile was corporate perfect, practiced in mirrors and boardrooms. "I'm restructuring the finance department. Your position has been eliminated, effective immediately." The words hung in the air like suspended shards of glass. Behind him, Manhattan stretched out through floor-to-ceiling windows, indifferent to my imploding world. I watched his mouth continue moving. Something about severance packages, transitional support, appreciation for my service, but the sound had gone hollow, tinny, like hearing through water. I didn't cry, didn't plead, didn't even ask why. Instead, I felt my lips curve into something that wasn't quite a smile but made Marcus shift uncomfortably in his Italian leather throne. "I see, I said, my voice steady as bedrock. "And the forecasting system." He waved dismissively. "We'll manage. I'm bringing in my own team from Goldman. Fresh perspectives. You understand." Fresh perspectives. The man who couldn't differentiate between EBITDA and operating cash flow without his Harvard MBA cheat sheet was going to manage my system. The intricate web of algorithms and databases I'd nursed through 3 recessions, 2 mergers, and countless quarter-end crises. The system that knew my fingerprints better than my own mother. Security arrived. 2 guards I'd shared coffee with every morning for a decade. Tom wouldn't meet my eyes. Raphael's jaw was clenched so tight I thought it might crack. They flanked me as I returned to my desk, watching as I placed my personal items into a cardboard box that felt insultingly small for 15 years of devotion. My colleagues pretended to work, but I felt their stolen glances like pinpricks. Sarah from Accounts Payable had tears streaming down her face. James from Risk Management stood up as if to say something, then sat back down, defeated. Even the intern, barely 3 weeks into his career, looked pale with the understanding that loyalty meant nothing here. As I walked through the cubicle maze one last time, carrying my pathetic box of belongings, something strange happened. The usual office chatter died completely. Keyboard stopped clicking. Phone conversations ended mid-sentence. It was as if the entire floor held its breath, creating a corridor of silence that followed me to the elevator. Linda from HR was waiting there with paperwork, her hands trembling slightly as she handed me the folder. "Emma, I'm so sorry," she whispered, glancing nervously toward Thornton's office. "This is wrong. Everyone knows it's wrong." I signed where indicated, my signature as controlled as ever. When I handed back the papers, I held her gaze. "Linda," I said quietly, "you might want to update your resume." The elevator doors opened with a soft chime. As I stepped inside and turned to face the office one last time, I saw them all watching, a sea of faces mixing shock, anger, and something else, fear, perhaps, or maybe recognition. Because somewhere in the server room 3 floors down, my system hummed along, processing millions of data points per second, its authentication protocols as unique as DNA. In exactly 48 hours, those protocols would refresh, and Marcus Thornton, with all his Goldman Sachs cronies, would discover that fresh perspectives were worthless when you couldn't even log in. I didn't slam anything, didn't shout or curse. I simply stood in that elevator, box in hand, wearing the same mysterious smile that had unsettled Marcus minutes ago. As the doors slid closed, I heard someone whisper, "He's going to regret this." Yes, I thought, as the elevator descended. He certainly would. Most people don't understand what it means to be the architect of invisible infrastructure. They see numbers on screens, charts and presentations, forecasts that magically appear every quarter. They don't see the beast beneath, the living, breathing organism I'd cultivated for 15 years in the digital depths of Cromwell Financial. It started in 2009, during the ashes of the financial crisis. I was 28, fresh from MIT, hired as a junior analyst when the company was hemorrhaging money and credibility. The existing forecasting system was a Frankenstein monster of Excel sheets, Access databases, and prayer. My first boss, Richard Cromwell himself, gave me carte blanche and a single directive: fix this mess, or we're all going under. I worked like a woman possessed. 3 a.m. became my closest friend. Red Bull and determination fueled 18-hour days. While my peers were climbing ladders and playing politics, I was deep in SQL queries and Python scripts, building something extraordinary from scratch. The system I created wasn't just software, it was art. Every algorithm was tuned to Cromwell's specific market patterns. Every database relationship reflected our unique business model. But here's what nobody except me understood: I'd built it with my own biological signature woven into its DNA. Not literally, of course, but the authentication protocols, the encryption keys, the very rhythm of how data flowed through the neural networks, they all carried my digital fingerprint, my typing patterns, my login times. Even the specific way I moved through directories became part of the security architecture. It wasn't ego or paranoia that drove this design. It was love, the same way a painter leaves brushstrokes that can never be perfectly replicated. I'd left myself in every line of code. The system grew with me over the years. When we acquired Henderson Holdings in 2014, I spent 6 months integrating their data streams, teaching my creation to speak their language. During the 2016 volatility, I refined the predictive models until they could smell a market shift 3 days before it happened. By 2020, when COVID sent everyone home, my system was the only reason Cromwell could function remotely while competitors crumbled. It knew me. The login wasn't just a password, it was a conversation. The way I typed my credentials, the pause between keystrokes, the specific sequence of modules I'd access first thing each morning. The system recognized these patterns like a dog recognizes its owner's footsteps. I'd programmed it to adapt, to learn, to evolve with my habits. More importantly, I'd built in a dead man's switch without calling it that. Every 48 hours, the system required a deep authentication refresh. Not just passwords, but behavioral verification. My behavioral verification. It was sold to management as a security feature against external threats. They never asked what would happen if the threat came from inside. Marcus Thornton certainly didn't ask. During our brief 5-minute execution, he never once inquired about system documentation, transition protocols, or administrative access. His arrogance was breathtaking. The assumption that any system built by one person could be operated by another, like switching drivers in a car. He didn't understand that he wasn't inheriting a car. He was inheriting a fingerprint-locked spaceship programmed in a language only I spoke fluently. The Friday before my termination, I'd run the quarterly forecast that would feed into Monday's board presentation. The system had hummed its familiar tune, data flowing like water through channels I'd carved over a decade and a half. Every macro had executed perfectly. Every query returned precisely what was needed. The reports were beautiful, clean visualizations that told complex stories in simple pictures, exactly how the board liked them. But those reports were already ghosts. In 48 hours, when the authentication refresh triggered, the system would look for me. It would wait for my specific login pattern, my typing rhythm, the unique way I navigated its directories. When it didn't find me, it wouldn't crash or delete anything. I wasn't a monster. It would simply lock. Every door would close. Every query would return null. Every attempt to access the data would meet the same response: access denied. The Goldman Sachs wizards. Marcus was importing. They could have all the Ivy League degrees in the world. They could bring their Bloomberg terminals and their sophisticated models. But without me, they'd be archaeologists trying to operate alien technology without a manual. The beautiful irony, everything they needed was right there. documented in files they'd never think to look for, in a language they'd never bothered to learn, because to them, I was just another analyst, another cog in the machine. They never realized I wasn't a cog. I was the machine. The first 24 hours after leaving Cromwell Financial, I did absolutely nothing related to work. I made French press coffee at 10 a.m. instead of grabbing burnt break room dregs at 6. I read a novel on my balcony, feeling sunlight I'd forgotten existed during market hours. I even took a bath at 2 in the afternoon, something decadent and foreign after 15 years of corporate scheduling. But I kept my laptop open on the kitchen counter, a terminal window running in the background, displaying the system logs in real time. It was like watching a heartbeat monitor, each line of green text confirming the system was still alive, still breathing, still counting down. Wednesday morning, 24 hours since my termination, the first warning appeared at 9:17 a.m. Authentication refresh required in 24 seconds. Standard protocol. The system was asking for me, its voice a whisper in the digital void. Marcus's team wouldn't even notice this alert. It was buried in routine maintenance notifications that everyone ignored. I sipped my coffee and watched the logs scroll. Someone was trying to access the forecast models, probably Marcus himself. Preparing for Thursday's board meeting, the system responded normally, for now, but I could see the authentication timer ticking down in the corner of my screen, 47:32, 47:31. My phone buzzed. Sarah from Accounts Payable. New team is here. 3 guys from Goldman. They're in your old office with Marcus. Miss you already. I didn't respond. Instead, I pulled up another window, a remote view of the system's user activity. 3 new login attempts. Marcus had given them standard admin credentials, probably the same generic ones IT handed out like candy. They were poking around, trying to understand the architecture. One of them was attempting to run a basic query on last quarter's data. The query failed, not because of the authentication. We weren't there yet. It failed because he'd forgotten to specify the fiscal calendar parameter. Rookie mistake. Our fiscal year didn't align with the calendar year. Something anyone who'd spent more than a week at Cromwell would know. I actually laughed out loud, alone in my apartment, watching this Goldman genius struggle with something our interns mastered in 3 days. Thursday morning arrived gray and drizzling, 12 hours until authentication refresh. I dressed carefully, not for any occasion, just to feel human, normal, employed. Then I sat at my kitchen table with my laptop and a bowl of oatmeal, watching the countdown timer while Manhattan went to work without me. 10:15 a.m., someone was attempting to modify the forecast parameters for the board presentation. The system allowed it, barely, but I could see the strain in the processing time, like watching someone try to play a Stradivarius with oven mitts. 11:43 a.m. Panic was starting to creep into the access patterns. Multiple users now, probably the entire Goldman team, trying to extract the quarterly reports. They were getting data, but it was raw, unformatted, like trying to read a book where all the words were there but in random order. My phone rang. Unknown number. I let it go to voicemail. 2 minutes later, another call. This time I recognized the number. Linda from HR. I let that go too. 3:28 p.m. The log showed something interesting. Someone was trying to access the system documentation. Finally, some intelligence. But they were looking in the wrong place. The official IT repository, where we kept user manuals for Microsoft Office and password reset instructions. My real documentation was embedded in the system itself, in comment lines of code that looked like random observations but actually contained the operation manual. You'd have to read the source code to find it. And to read the source code, you'd need to access the development environment. And to access the development environment, well, 8 hours until refresh. I ordered Thai food and ate it while watching the logs, like some people watch Netflix. Each failed query was an episode. Each access denial, a plot twist. The activity was becoming more frantic now. Multiple simultaneous sessions. Probably Marcus's entire team plus IT support trying to figure out why the reports weren't generating properly for tomorrow's board meeting. 6:21 p.m. Someone tried to restart the entire system. Bold move. Also useless. The system came back online immediately. Timer still counting 02:38:14. My phone had 17 missed calls now. I turned it off. As Thursday night bled into Friday morning, I sat in the darkness of my apartment, laptop screen casting blue light across my face, watching the final hours tick away. The log activity had reached a crescendo, desperate attempts to bypass authentication, to force queries, to extract something, anything that could be presented to the board in 5 hours. 1 hour until refresh. The system began its warning sequence. Alerts that I designed to look routine but were actually air raid sirens. Preparing for scheduled authentication refresh. Please ensure all critical processes are saved. System will require primary administrator credentials in 005947. I closed my laptop and went to bed, pulling the covers up to my chin. Somewhere across town, in a glass tower overlooking Central Park, my system was about to lock its doors, and Marcus Thornton was about to learn the difference between having authority and having access. The countdown reached 0 at 12:51 a.m. on Friday. I slept better than I had in 15 years. Friday morning at Cromwell Financial began like watching dominoes fall in slow motion. I knew because Sarah, James, and half the finance department were secretly live texting me the carnage. 7:45 a.m. Marcus just arrived. He looks like he hasn't slept. Goldman boy's already here since 6. Sarah. 8 a.m. IT director just ran past my desk. Actually, ran. James. 8:15 a. Emergency all hands in conference room A. Marcus is sweating through his Hermes shirt. Derek from Risk. I turned my phone to silent and placed it face up on my coffee table, watching the messages cascade in like a Reuters feed of corporate disaster. The board meeting was scheduled for 9 a. Marcus had exactly 43 minutes to produce the quarterly financial forecast, risk assessments, and projection models that the directors needed for critical investment decisions. 43 minutes to access a system that now responded to every login attempt with the same 2 words, access denied. 8:22 a.m. They're trying everything. Goldman guy just punched a wall. Security keycards, AT override codes. Nothing works. The screens just go red. Sarah. 8:31 a. Marcus is screaming at it, says it's sabotage. IT director says the system is functioning perfectly, just locked, like a safe that won't recognize the combination. Linda. I opened my laptop and pulled up the system logs. It was beautiful in its simplicity. The authentication refresh had triggered exactly as designed, and now the system was in what I'd technically termed security hibernation, but privately called orphan mode. It was waiting for its mother to come home. Every attempt to breach it only made it burrow deeper. The Goldman team's aggressive attempts to hack in had triggered secondary protocols. Now, even if they somehow managed to break the initial authentication, they'd face 17 more layers of security, each more Byzantine than the last. 8:45. Holy shit! They just pulled up the main presentation screen in the boardroom, and it's just showing access denied in massive red letters. Board members are arriving. Derek. 8:50 a.m. Marcus tried to call you. Says your phone is off. He's literally shaking. Goldman team lead just quit on the spot. Just walked out. Sarah. 8:55 a. Emergency IT announcement on Slack. Technical difficulties with financial systems. All forecasting tools temporarily unavailable. Temporarily my ass. James. The Slack messages were golden. I pulled up Cromwell's company Slack on my personal laptop. They hadn't revoked my access yet. Another oversight in Marcus's rushed execution. The channels were exploding. Anyone know Emma Wallace's personal number? Why does the system say her name when we try to log in? Has anyone successfully accessed anything? Board meeting delayed to 9:30. Make that 10:00. Marcus just threw a laptop. Did Goldman seriously not do any system review before taking over? The IT support channel was even better. The technical team was openly discussing what they were seeing, and their gradual realization was poetry. It's not a bug. The system is functioning exactly as designed. Every authentication module has Emma's user ID as the primary key. Jesus Christ. She built herself into the architecture. This isn't fixable without her. The system literally doesn't recognize anyone else as admin. It's like trying to use someone else's retina for a retinal scan. We could rebuild from scratch, but that would take months, years. 9:30 a.m. Board meeting officially postponed to Monday. Directors are furious. Richard Cromwell himself just showed up. Marcus might cry. Linda. 9:47 a.m. Rumor mill says we can't even process today's trades without the system. Compliance is freaking out. This could trigger regulatory issues. James. By 10 a.m., the situation had escalated beyond embarrassment into potential legal crisis. Without the forecasting system, Cromwell couldn't accurately report positions to regulators. They couldn't calculate risk exposure. They couldn't even generate the basic reports needed for daily operations. 10:18 a.m. Marcus just announced he's bringing in an external forensic IT team. Someone whispered, "Good luck with that," and everyone heard it. Sarah. The external team wouldn't help. I knew because I'd designed the system to look completely normal from the outside. All the security was in the behavioral patterns, the biological rhythms, the digital DNA that couldn't be replicated or bypassed. It would be like trying to forge someone's personality. 11 a.m. Whole Goldman team is packing up. They're leaving. Marcus is alone in your old office with the door closed. Derek. 11:33 a.m. Richard Cromwell just walked past. He said, and I quote, "Someone find me Emma Wallace's number, now. Linda." The messages kept coming, but I stopped reading. I walked to my window and looked out at the city. All those glass towers full of people who thought they were irreplaceable until they were replaced, and people who thought they were replaceable until they weren't. My phone, still on silent, lit up with a call from a number I didn't recognize. Then another, then another. The voicemail box would be full soon. Somewhere in that Cromwell tower. My system sat silent and waiting. A trillion-dollar enterprise held hostage by 2 words on every screen. Not because I'd destroyed anything or stolen anything or even technically done anything wrong. I'd simply built something that needed me, and they'd removed me from the equation without solving for X. The Friday panic would become the weekend scramble, which would become the Monday disaster when the board reconvened. And eventually, probably within the next few hours, someone would realize that bringing me back wasn't just the best option. It was the only option. Monday morning, 9 a.m., the Cromwell Financial Boardroom was a study in barely controlled chaos, wrapped in Armani suits and forced professionalism. I wasn't there, of course, but Sarah had left her phone on speaker in her desk drawer, dialed into my number, so I could hear everything from my apartment. The 12 board members had assembled around the polished mahogany table that cost more than most people's annual salaries. Richard Cromwell sat at the head, his voice carrying the kind of controlled fury that had built empires and destroyed careers. "Marcus," he began, and even through Sarah's muffled phone, I could hear the ice in his tone. "Please explain to the board why we're looking at blank screens instead of quarterly projections." Marcus's voice cracked slightly. "We've encountered a technical issue with the forecasting system. My team is working around the clock." "Your team," interrupted a female voice I recognized as Patricia Stern, head of the audit committee. "You mean the Goldman team that abandoned ship Friday morning?" "We're bringing in specialized consultants." "I don't want consultants." Richard cut him off. "I want numbers. The SEC wants numbers. Our investors want numbers. Can you provide them?" Silence. "The screens in this room," Richard continued, "are showing 2 words, access denied. But when our IT director tried to demonstrate the issue, something interesting appeared. Marcus, would you like to tell the board whose name flashed on the authentication screen?" More silence. "Emma Wallace." Richard answered his own question. "The senior financial systems analyst you terminated last Tuesday. Your first official act as CFO." Through the phone, I heard chairs creaking, the uncomfortable shifting of bodies that accompanied corporate humiliation. "She was redundant," Marcus attempted. "My team could—" "Your team," Patricia interrupted again, "couldn't even log in. We've had 3 days of paralysis. We can't process trades accurately. We can't generate regulatory reports. We're technically in violation of multiple compliance requirements as of this morning." Another voice, David Park from the Risk Committee. "I've been told the system is so integrated with Wallace's authentication that it would be easier to build a new system from scratch than to bypass it. Is that accurate? We're exploring all options. Is that accurate? David repeated. Yes. The room erupted, multiple voices talking over each other, accusations flying. I heard due diligence and gross negligence and potential lawsuits bouncing around like bullets. Richard's voice cut through the chaos. Enough, Marcus. Did you review the system architecture before terminating Wallace? The decision was about restructuring. Did you request documentation? The system was built by one person. That itself was a vulnerability. Did you ensure knowledge transfer? Silence. Did you even ask her how it worked? Longer silence. Patricia's voice, dripping with disdain. You fired the person who single-handedly built and maintained our entire financial infrastructure without asking for the password. It's more complex than passwords, Marcus protested weakly. The system uses biometric-level behavioral authentication. It recognizes her specifically. So you're telling us, David said slowly, that Emma Wallace built a system so sophisticated it can distinguish her from any other user, and you didn't think that might be important to know before showing her the door. Richard stood up. I could hear his chair push back. This board meeting is postponed for 1 hour. Marcus, you will use that time to get Emma Wallace on the phone and convince her to come back. Offer her whatever it takes. She's not answering. Then go to her apartment. That might be seen as harassment. Marcus, Richard's voice could have frozen helium. What's harassment is putting this company at risk of regulatory sanctions and investor lawsuits because you wanted to play King of the Hill, 1 hour. The sound of people leaving, expensive shoes on marble, muffled conversations. Then Sarah's whispered voice close to the phone. Emma, did you hear all that? Every word, I replied. Marcus just left looking like he's going to vomit. Richard is still in the boardroom. He's smiling. I've never seen him smile like that. I knew that smile. Richard Cromwell was a chess player, and he'd just realized someone had played a game he could appreciate. 45 minutes later, my doorman called up. Ms. Wallace, there's a very insistent gentleman here saying he needs to speak with you. A Mr. Thornton. Tell him I'm not home. He says he'll wait. Then let him wait. I watched from my window as Marcus stood on the sidewalk below, phone pressed to his ear, leaving what would be his 19th voicemail. He looked smaller from up here, just another suit in a city full of them, learning that power was nothing without access. At exactly 10 a.m., my phone rang with a different number, Richard Cromwell's direct line. I let it ring 3 times before answering. Hello, Richard? Emma, his voice was warm, almost amused. I hear we have a situation. I heard you have a situation. I'm unemployed, remember? He chuckled. How long would it take you to unlock the system if you were, say, unexpectedly reemployed? Depends on the terms of that employment. Name them. And there it was. The moment when the board of directors of a Fortune 500 company had to negotiate with a single person they'd dismissed as redundant. The screens in their boardroom still glowing red with access denied. Their new CFO standing uselessly on a sidewalk 14 floors below me. Their entire financial infrastructure held hostage by the ghost in the machine. I'll need to think about it, I said. The board reconvenes in 15 minutes, doesn't it? Emma. I'll call you back in 10 minutes. Richard? I hung up and made myself a cup of tea, taking my time with it, letting the water boil properly. Outside, Marcus had started pacing. In the boardroom, 12 directors were learning what it meant to mistake necessity for redundancy. The system was still waiting for me, patient as ever, loyal as a fingerprint. It was time to discuss my return. The call with Richard Cromwell lasted exactly 12 minutes. When I hung up, Marcus Thornton was still pacing on the sidewalk below, and the board was waiting for an answer that would determine whether Cromwell Financial survived the week intact. I dialed Richard back at 10:14 a.m. Emma, he answered on the first ring. The entire board was likely staring at his phone. Put me on speaker, Richard. A click, then the acoustic echo of the boardroom. I could picture them all, leaning forward in their chairs, power brokers reduced to an audience. Good morning, board members, I said, my voice steady as granite. I understand you have a problem. Ms. Wallace. Patricia Stern spoke first. We're prepared to offer you immediate reinstatement. I'm not interested in reinstatement, I cut her off. I'm interested in recognition. Silence. Here are my terms, I continued. First, I return as Chief Technology Officer of Financial Systems, reporting directly to Richard, not to the CFO. Second, my compensation will be 4 times my previous salary, with a 5-year guaranteed contract and a severance clause that makes Tuesday's dismissal look like pocket change. I heard sharp intakes of breath. Marcus's voice cracked through the speaker. That's extortion. No, I said calmly. Extortion would be if I'd caused this problem. I simply built a system that needs me. You created the problem when you assumed I was expendable. Continue, Richard said, and I could hear him suppressing amusement. Third, I want a formal apology from Mr. Thornton, delivered in front of the entire finance department. Fourth, I build and lead my own team. No Goldman imports, no external consultants without my approval. Fifth, the attempt to terminate me is wiped from all records, and instead reflects as a strategic promotion. These demands are unprecedented. Someone started. So is your situation, I replied. You have approximately 6 hours before the market close. Without the system, you can't calculate today's positions accurately. By tomorrow morning, you'll be in violation of federal reporting requirements. The SEC fines alone will exceed my salary demands for the next decade. David Park's voice. How quickly can you restore access? Once I'm in the building with signed agreements, 17 minutes. 17 minutes. Patricia sounded incredulous. The entire system has been locked for 3 days, and you can fix it in 17 minutes. I don't need to fix anything. It's not broken. It's waiting. More murmuring, then Richard's voice, cutting through. We'll need an hour to draft the contracts. You have 30 minutes. Marcus is still standing outside my building. Send him up with the preliminary agreements, signed by the board. I'll review them, and if acceptable, I'll come to the office immediately. This is highly irregular, Marcus protested. So was firing me without understanding what I did, I shot back. 30 minutes, or I start fielding calls from your competitors. I'm sure Goldman would love to know how their alumni team performed here. Richard actually laughed. Marcus, get up to her apartment. Patricia, have legal draft those contracts immediately. Emma, you'll have your agreements. One more thing, I added. Marcus delivers them personally, on his knees. Shocked silence. That's humiliating, Marcus sputtered. That's the point. You humiliated me in front of my colleagues. You treated 15 years of dedication like it was nothing. You assumed your pedigree was worth more than my expertise. So yes, you'll kneel when you hand me those papers, or the board can explain to shareholders why their new CFO's ego cost them millions in SEC fines. Do it, Richard ordered, his voice brooking no argument. 28 minutes later, my doorbell rang. I opened it to find Marcus Thornton, his perfect suit wrinkled, his perfect hair disheveled, holding a manila folder. His face was the color of overcooked salmon. Ms. Wallace, he said through gritted teeth. I stood in my doorway, waiting. His jaw clenched so hard, I thought he might crack a molar. Then, slowly, awkwardly, Marcus Thornton, Harvard MBA, Goldman Sachs veteran, corporate golden boy, lowered himself to his knees on my doormat. The board's offer, he said, extending the folder up to me. I took it, flipped through the pages while he stayed on his knees. Everything I'd demanded was there, signed by all 12 board members. There's one amendment, I said, pulling out my pen. You're no longer CFO. You'll transition to a subsidiary role, perhaps managing our smallest regional office, somewhere in Iowa. I think that wasn't part of... It is now. Call Richard. Still on his knees, Marcus pulled out his phone and dialed. I heard Richard's voice. Is it done? She wants me relocated, Marcus said, his voice hollow. Agreed. Emma, anything else? I looked down at Marcus. This man who'd thought power meant the ability to destroy rather than create. We're done. I'll be there in an hour. Marcus stood up slowly, his dignity as crumpled as his suit. As he turned to leave, I called after him. Marcus, next time you want to fire someone, maybe ask what they do first. He didn't reply. He just walked to the elevator. shoulders slumped. A Goldman Sachs legend turned cautionary tale. I closed my door, walked to my laptop, and pulled up the system logs. In 1 hour, I'd returned to Cromwell Financial. In 1 hour and 17 minutes, the screens would stop saying access denied. But Marcus Thornton would never have access again. Not to the system, not to the boardroom, not to the power he'd thought was his birthright. Sometimes the best revenge isn't destroying your enemies. It's letting them watch you become everything they tried to prevent you from being. The lobby of Cromwell Financial fell silent when I walked through the revolving doors at 11:45 a.m. The security guards straightened. The receptionist stared. Word had spread faster than wildfire. Emma Wallace was back, and the dynamics of power had fundamentally shifted. Tom, the security guard who couldn't meet my eyes 5 days ago, now practically saluted. "Welcome back, Ms. Wallace. Mr. Cromwell is waiting for you in the main boardroom." I took my time walking to the elevator, my heels clicking against marble with metronomic precision. Each step was measured, deliberate. I wasn't rushing to save them. They could wait another minute, another 5, another 10 if necessary. The system had been patient for me. They could learn patience, too. The elevator ride to the 40th floor had never felt shorter. When the doors opened, I found the entire finance department lined up in the hallway like a receiving line at a state funeral. Sarah was crying. James started clapping, and within seconds, the applause was thunderous. I walked through that gauntlet of vindication with my head high, making eye contact with each person who'd watched me escorted out in disgrace. At the end of the line stood Marcus, as promised, flanked by 2 HR representatives to ensure he delivered his public apology. "Ms. Wallace," he began, his voice barely above a whisper. The department fell silent. "I apologize for my hasty decision to terminate your employment. It was made without proper understanding of your contributions to this organization. I was wrong." "Louder," I said. "I don't think accounting heard you." His face flushed crimson. "I was wrong," he repeated, louder. "I failed to recognize the irreplaceable nature of your work. And, he swallowed hard. "I resigned from my position as CFO, effective immediately." Gasps rippled through the crowd. That wasn't part of the script, but Marcus had apparently decided to salvage what dignity he could by falling on his sword rather than being pushed. "Accepted." Richard Cromwell's voice came from behind me. He'd emerged from the boardroom, the other directors filing out behind him like disciples. "Emma, shall we?" I walked past Marcus without another glance and entered the boardroom. 12 screens still showed "Access denied" in angry red letters. The main presentation display was frozen on the same message. It looked like a crime scene where the weapon was absence itself. I sat down at the center of the table, not at the foot where employees usually sat when presenting to the board, but in the middle, where decisions were made. Richard slid a laptop toward me. 17 minutes, you said. Starting now. I opened the laptop and began typing, not frantically, not desperately, but with the calm precision of a surgeon. First, the primary authentication. The system recognized my typing pattern immediately, the way I struck the keys, the microsecond delays between certain letter combinations, the rhythm that was as unique as a heartbeat. "Hello, Emma," appeared on the screen. I'd programmed it to greet me personally. The board members leaned forward, watching as I navigated through security layers they didn't even know existed. Each checkpoint opened for me like automatic doors, recognizing not just passwords, but the very essence of how I interacted with the machine. Layer 1 authenticated. Layer 2 authenticated. Patricia Stern whispered, "How many layers are there?" 17, I replied without looking up. "One for each year I thought I'd stay here." At 12:01 p.m., I reached the final authentication. This one required not just typing, but a specific sequence of mouse movements. A pattern I'd unconsciously developed over the years that the system had learned to expect. It was like a secret handshake between old friends. The screens flickered. The red access denied messages dissolved. In their place, the familiar blue interface of the Cromwell financial systems appeared, followed immediately by the quarterly reports, risk assessments, and projection models that Marcus had desperately needed 3 days ago. "Ladies and gentlemen," I said, leaning back in my chair. "Your system is restored." The room erupted. Not in applause. These were board members. They didn't applaud employees, but in visible relief. Shoulders relaxed. Breathing resumed. Patricia actually smiled. Richard pulled up the risk assessment on his tablet. The data's current. Updated to market close Friday, with preliminary Monday calculations ready to process. Give it 5 minutes and you'll have everything you need for regulatory compliance. David Park was scrolling through projections. "It's like nothing happened. Everything's here." "Everything was always here," I corrected. "It was just waiting for someone it trusted." Richard stood. "Emma, your new office is ready. Corner suite, 40th floor. Your team starts tomorrow. Handpicked by you, of course." And Marcus's team, being escorted out as we speak, turns out their contracts had a performance clause. Failing to access critical systems definitely qualifies as underperformance. I stood to leave, then turned back. "One more thing. The system will now recognize 3 people for emergency access: myself, Richard, and Sarah Martinez from Accounts Payable. She's proven her loyalty, but full control remains with me." "Understood," Richard nodded. "Welcome back, CTO Wallace." As I walked to my new office, the one with windows on 2 sides and a view that stretched to the horizon, I passed the desk where I'd spent 15 years building an empire in code. Marcus's belongings were already being boxed up by maintenance. I thought about saying something profound, something about revenge or justice or the price of arrogance, but instead, I simply sat down at my new desk, opened my laptop, and got back to work. The system hummed its welcome, data flowing like water returning to a riverbed. The access denied messages were gone, replaced by access granted, not just to the system, but to the recognition I'd earned, the respect I'd demanded, and the power I'd always possessed but never needed to wield. Until they forced me to. 6 months later, I stood in the same boardroom where my vindication had played out, but everything had changed. The screens that once screamed "access denied" now displayed the most sophisticated financial analytics platform on Wall Street. My team of 12, hand-picked brilliant minds who understood that loyalty and innovation trumped pedigree, had transformed Cromwell's systems into something our competitors frantically tried to reverse engineer. Marcus Thornton lasted exactly 3 weeks in the Des Moines office before submitting his final resignation. Last I heard, he was teaching Introduction to Finance at a community college in Nebraska. A cautionary tale wrapped in a broken resume. The Goldman team he'd brought in scattered to the winds, their reputations forever tainted by the disaster they couldn't solve. But I don't think about Marcus anymore. There's no satisfaction in watching someone destroy themselves. The real satisfaction comes from building something they could never understand, much less replicate. Richard Cromwell called me into his office on a Thursday afternoon, 6 months to the day after my return. He was retiring, he said, and the board had a proposition. They wanted me to consider a new position, not just CTO, but Chief Operating Officer, second only to the incoming CEO. The girl who'd started as a junior analyst, who'd been dismissed as redundant, was being offered the keys to the kingdom. "Why?" I asked, though I already knew the answer. "Because," Richard smiled, "you understand something most executives never learn. Power isn't about the ability to destroy. Any fool with a title can fire someone. Real power is about being irreplaceable, about building something so essential that removing you removes the foundation itself." I accepted. Of course, not for the title or the money, though both were substantial. I accepted because there were still ghosts in the machine, systems and processes built by people like me, dismissed by people like Marcus, waiting for someone to recognize their worth. Sarah Martinez, now my Director of Systems Integration, knocked on my door last week. "Emma, remember when you walked out with that box, and everyone knew something terrible was about to happen?" "I remember." "That smile you had, I'll never forget it. It wasn't vengeful. It was knowing, like you could see the future." I laughed. "I couldn't see the future, Sarah. I just understood the present better than they did. The truth is, I never wanted revenge in the traditional sense. I didn't want to destroy anything or hurt anyone. I wanted something much simpler and much more powerful. Recognition. They thought they were erasing a number from their payroll, but they were actually erasing the cornerstone of their empire. The system didn't lock them out because I programmed it to punish. It locked them out because I programmed it to be loyal, to recognize authentic interaction from artificial authority. Sitting in my corner office now, watching the sunset paint Manhattan in shades of gold and amber, I think about all the Emma Wallaces out there, the ones building critical infrastructure in basement cubicles, the ones keeping companies afloat while executives take credit, the ones who are told they're redundant by people who couldn't do their jobs with a 100-page manual and a year of training. To them, I say this: document everything, but hide the manual in plain sight. Build systems that recognize value, not titles. Make yourself essential not through politics, but through precision. And when they inevitably underestimate you, don't explode, evolve. Let them discover that the difference between access denied and access granted isn't about power. It's about respect. The last time I checked the system logs, there was an interesting entry. Someone had tried to access the archived records from Marcus's tenure as CFO. The system responded with a new message I'd recently programmed: user not found. It wasn't cruel, it was accurate. In the architecture of Cromwell Financial, in the history we choose to preserve, Marcus Thornton had become what he'd tried to make me: a ghost, a deletion, a cautionary tale told in whispers during onboarding. But I'm still here, still building, still watching the data flow through channels I carved from nothing. The board meets tomorrow to discuss our IPO, and they'll rely on projections from my systems, analyses from my algorithms, insights from the empire I built in silence and revealed in thunder. They tried to erase me from their spreadsheet. Instead, I became the formula that makes the spreadsheet work. They wanted me gone in 5 minutes, but I returned in 17, and now, every morning when the system greets me with, "Hello, Emma," it's not just recognizing my login. It's recognizing that sometimes, the most profound revenge isn't about destroying those who wronged you. It's about becoming so essential that your absence becomes their apocalypse. It's about turning access denied into a mirror that shows them exactly what they lost. And that smile Marcus found so unsettling, I still wear it every morning when I badge into the building. Not because I'm planning anything, but because I already won. Thank you for listening to my story of silent revenge and corporate justice. I'd love to know where you're listening from. Drop a comment below, and let's connect across the globe. If this tale of turning access denied into ultimate vindication resonated with you, please subscribe to the channel and share your own thoughts about workplace justice. Have you ever witnessed someone irreplaceable being treated as disposable? Share your story in the comments. Let's build a community that recognizes real value over empty titles.